What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I did want to touch on a subject here on Need for Speed Unbound that I would probably say people have been thinking about, but why is the Need for Speed Unbound's player base so small? Or I guess you could say it's going to be smaller than it probably should be. We all do know the Volume 7 update came out, and don't get me wrong, guys, Need for Speed Unbound is not dead in any way. There's obviously a lot of new players getting on it. I mean, Volume 7 is fun. They're obviously updating the game with around 30 developers, which is pretty dang impressive. The Speed Pass is going to have some dope content and stuff in it, so I do think it is going to be pretty dang fun to play and most likely attract new people. Now, I do know I'm probably going to get some people going, well, Block, the game's not dead, man. What are you talking about? It's really populated. Which, don't get me wrong, the game has a lot of people on it. I'm not saying it doesn't have a lot of players, but I feel like it should have a lot more on the game itself because at the moment, trying to do certain like PvP playlists and stuff at certain times during the day, you are most likely going to have issues finding people to join them. And on top of that though, even doing some of the main events, like if you wanted to do S Plus events, going into like a free mode lobby, I could barely even find a full one, and I would maybe have one person join me on a good day for that matter. So I do think it's an issue, especially if they're not having like AI filling up the lobbies if there's not enough people to fill them up. And I know for a fact, though, a lot of players might be wondering and also asking questions on why the lobbies are most likely not going to be full, or what is going to be the reason for Unbound not doing as good as people think it is. You know what, guys? I don't know how right I am on this, but I do feel like there's going to be a key factor here. Let's be real, Need for Speed Unbound is only on next-gen consoles and PC. This game is not going to be on previous gen, which I would say right now from like the research I have done, and also watching other YouTubers when talking about Call of Duty and stuff being on last gen, there is apparently over 48 million people still playing on PlayStation 4 alone. We do know right now Xbox is probably going to be fairly similar in that aspect, like not everybody has bought a new consoles, or maybe they don't want to, maybe they don't have a need to. So what if you did not actually have the game on last gen? Well, that's going to be over 48 million plus people not playing Need for Speed Unbound on just PlayStation. Imagine Xbox as well. For example here, imagine for a second if this game was also on last gen. I feel like the player base would be way bigger because if we look at something like Need for Speed Heat, which I'm actually going to touch on in a different video, that game is still thriving because it's also on both platforms and, you know, PC as well. And the other way I was looking at this is, let's say there's maybe around 60 or 70 million people, maybe more, not sure if it's less or, you know, whatever the number actually is, being on PlayStation 5 alone. How many of those players are actually going to buy Need for Speed Unbound? I would say it's probably going to be fairly low, but how this game was handled in the beginning, it's obviously going to be making a big return now, and the game is insanely fun after the updates, but how many players are most likely going to return to it? Whereas something like this game, guys, being back on PlayStation 4 and the old Xbox, I feel like a lot of people are like, yo, Need for Speed Unbound, let's get this. I would guarantee right now the player base would be probably 10 times or even 20 times bigger than it currently is. Now, the other thing to look at with this, though, is if Need for Speed Unbound was on the last-gen consoles, we all do know the graphics are probably going to be worse, and it is most likely not going to run as smooth in certain areas like a PlayStation 5 would, or like, you know, a next-gen console slash a PC, but at least you would still be able to play it. I mean, we all do know Need for Speed Heat runs pretty dang good. Could it run better on a PS5? I mean, maybe, but the PS4 version still being played on a PS5, so it's still technically a PS4 game. Now, if we were having something like Unbound being on a PlayStation 4, I do know even with worse graphics, guys, I do know a lot of players would end up buying it, and then in return, that would be a lot more players in the lobbies doing events and stuff like that, so then I can actually get an S Plus leveled vehicle a bit easier and unlock it, because at the moment, doing 35 of those events and only having one player in there isn't the funnest experience ever. I mean, like, obviously having one person there, you can do it, but why not fill the entire lobby up with AI because there's not enough people? To me, though, I feel like this probably plays a big role because I do know a lot of players have been wondering why, like, finding a lobby is a bit more difficult, and I was like, wait a second, man, I know this is true, and it's obviously been a thing, but Unbound's only on next-gen consoles, man, that plays a big role. A lot of people are still playing on last-gen. Like, you guys can imagine the amount of people that would be on Unbound if the game released on PS4 and the old Xbox. Now, here's the other thing I did want to ask, though. Now, I could be wrong here, guys. Let me know in the comments below, but do you think they were working on a last-gen port for the game, but they most likely scrapped it because of Battlefield 2042, which, you know, in return was legit just Axed before, whereas they're now working on Unbound until the end of this year. And guess what? They are most likely going to have a whole nother year of updates coming out on Unbound because, for one, we're obviously going to be in 2025, which means there's not going to be a Need for Speed game because they are then going to release the next Battlefield game pretty much around the same window as Grand Theft Auto 6, which is not a very smart idea, I would probably say. But we're most likely going to get Need for Speed updates until the next Need for Speed game, which is when? Most likely the year after. I will probably touch on this in a different video, but one way I'm looking at this, though, is it would actually make a lot of sense because if you guys think about this for a second, we do know 2042 was obviously coming out around Unbound, and during that time, they probably took people off of Unbound and had it on there, whereas if they actually had a last-gen port for Unbound, would have made a ton of sense. They all do know not everybody had a PS5 back in 2022, which I would probably say is fairly accurate. Even now, most of those people are still on PS4, so why not release the game on last-gen consoles? Don't get me wrong, I do know Battlefield 2042 is the next big Battlefield game. If it was truly the next big Battlefield game, why is it axed? You know, I had to ask that question. We all do know the next Battlefield game is, what, a year and a half away now, which is crazy, while they keep updating Need for Speed Unbound. Like, I don't want to say this, guys, but you know what? We have to. Just release Need for Speed Unbound on last-gen consoles right now, bro. We all do know this game is going to be out for another year or longer, most likely getting updates. And here's the funny thing I was legit just thinking about yesterday. Let's just say for a minute here, guys, they do end up updating Need for Speed Unbound into 2026. Most likely going all the way till the next Need for Speed release, which would probably make sense. Right now, I'm going to say this: just release Need for Speed Unbound on the last-gen consoles. Now, the funny part about this, though, is I probably am losing my mind a bit here because this is probably not going to happen. We all do know right now the current crew on Unbound is going to be a pretty small dev team, whereas most of the other developers are working on the next Battlefield title, so we're probably not going to be getting this game on last-gen consoles. But to be real, guys, the biggest reason why I'm saying that, though, is I think it would help the player base so much, because as of right now, I would say the overall player base of Unbound is honestly pretty dang tiny. Do let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below, and to be honest, I feel like this is the biggest thing hurting it.